for our society? And two, how can we generate enough clean energy to prevent the climate crisis? The technology for change is here. Our latest generation of offshore wind turbines, for example, has an output of up to 50 megawatts. And each wind turbine generates enough energy for 18,000 households. As a leader in offshore wind technology, we build wind turbines with outputs in the gigawatt range. In each of our wind power plants, more than 100 of those wind turbines generate clean electricity at sea. The wind industry is of strategic importance in the energy transformation. Now is the time for us to make a joint decision to support the rapid expansion of wind energy, together with governments and investors, together with project developers and the public. Let's keep the wind industry as a strong economic sector in the long term, in Europe and also worldwide.
Yes, thanks very much for that scene setting. Now I'd like to introduce our first speaker today, Christian Bender, who is the commercial head office offshore platform and portfolio head of offshore platform and portfolio management at SGRE. Christian, welcome to the stage. Please make him feel welcome.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here this morning. I hope you can hear me. I'm standing in for, as you can see, I'm not, first surprise, I'm not Mark Becker. So, but I'm standing in for him. Mark, unfortunately, has contracted COVID, so he cannot be here, but he's doing okay. So let me give you some thoughts of Siemens Gamesa on the Asia-Pacific region. And I'll start with a little bit about ourselves. You can see some data. We see ourselves as the market leader in offshore. We have, in the meantime, 20 gigawatt installed. We have more than 6,000 employees. We've got an order book that's more than 10 billion. And we have a revenue of about 3 billion. And that's the status as of June. And we hope that that will continue to grow over time. When it comes to APAC, I think you mentioned it already, we see a significant growth. If you look at the left side of the chart, you will see that the growth so far has been moderate. It's been at around 8.4. But we do see that kicking off after 26 at more than 20% CAGR, which is faster than the rest of the market. So that's why this market is growing stronger than the rest of the offshore market. Really impressive. What we also see is the distribution of that as taken from the GWEC report. You'll see the countries leading, led by Taiwan with 14. You'll see South Korea catching up at more than 7. Japan is a big market at around 6. And Vietnam is equally in that range. And India is a little bit smaller for the meantime, but of course, this is only until 2031. So that can, of course, change over time. What I wanted to say on this market is the takeaway line at the bottom of the slide. Any local content that we have to manufacture will have to be competitive so that we can also export within the region or even in globally, because we will not be able to afford investments into that region if it's only located to one country itself. No? When we look at the Asia-Pacific region and we look at the challenges and the opportunities we have 4 challenges and 4 opportunities. Unfortunately, we're seeing a tendency towards this country-specific or country-centric local content approach, which I just mentioned. We're sometimes seeing not so mature regulations and scoring systems, which lead to uncertainties for us, but also for the developers, of course. We see sometimes an issue finding suitable vessels and some hindrance in the local regulations. This is not specific to the Asian market. We also see that in the US, for example. And then we see a tendency towards smaller project sizes, which, as many of you know, is not helping to get to scale effects and cost competitiveness. Now, what we think where the opportunity actually lies in APAC is to leverage these cross-regional, let's call them clusters. For example, we have a very strong cluster in Korea on foundations, shipyards, for example. We have a good tower manufacturing capability in Vietnam. So this is strength in the Asian region that we maybe do not see in other regions in the world. So that's a unique opportunity. We do see some government schemes which are extremely attractive and supportive. So we would like to build on that some more. The market will force us to develop innovative approaches because of the logistics constraints I just mentioned. So maybe if we do that, we can also leverage them elsewhere. So that's interesting. I'll come back to floating later on. For example, installing the complete turbine in the harbor and just towing it out could be one of these concepts. And then finally, we have some very good wind resources and some strong long coastlines in the region, which makes it attractive. Now, looking at what we have done so far as Siemens Gamesa in 2 markets, and we'd like to pick out here Taiwan and Korea. Taiwan actually is a market where we are very proud that we have actually built a real nacelle assembly facility. And that has been now is being made fit to produce our newest turbine generation, the 14 megawatt 222. So that's something that we are very, very proud of. We're also training our technicians on the ground. The technicians have been very, very brave during the COVID times. They've had shifts of 3 weeks on the ground after going through quarantine for a couple of weeks, separated from their families. So this has been a tough time for them, but we're very proud of what we have done so far. And if you look to the right-hand side, you will see that we actually have you may have seen it in the press, a very innovative approach in Korea, where we are working with Doosan to come to a cooperation. We've signed a memorandum of understanding that we were looking into all parts of the value chain together with Doosan in Korea. So I'm looking forward to that. Actually, the team is on the ground in Korea right now discussing these topics. So, as I said in the beginning, Taiwan remains the front runner and Korea is catching up fast. If we look at floating, floating is, the technology is ready for floating. The challenge we see is that it is not yet at an industrial scale. So we do see a need to mature the floating technology and also the installation and everything around floating. I mean, this is something that is true not only for APAC, but for the globe in general. So that's not specific. However, I'll get back to that in a minute. There is something in APAC that makes APAC special for floating. So what we would need is, we would need foundations with scalability and industrialization potential, as I said. We would need concepts to assemble these large structures and install them with a high frequency output. They would typically come from shipyards. We would typically get not too many a week out of that, and we would have to work on that a little more to get more out per week. Especially if we look at the right-hand side, if you look at the sizes of the projects, for example, in Korea, you can see that these have increased significantly compared to where we came from. You might recall Siemens Gamesa did a first floating project in Norway called Hywind Tampen. That's a 2.3 gigawatt machine. That was 2009. If you look at these sizes here, 1.3 gigawatt capacity, 2.6 gigawatt at the top, that's quite amazing. And that is also something where the Korean market is leading worldwide. What is also special about Korea is that they have the shipyard building capabilities, which means they can actually manufacture these very complex foundations. And that gives that market a unique opportunity to be leading the floating development. So I think last point is we need visibility of the pipeline and to be able to explore these commercial opportunities, triggering this industrialization and de-risking the whole concept. So with that, how am I doing on time? I think that was my, it's fine, good. But then I would like to thank you very much.
Thank you for that introduction, Christian. And Christian will be joining the panel in about 5 minutes' time when we invite other panelists, other CEOs and leaders to join on stage here. Interesting that you also talked about floating offshore wind. If people are interested in floating offshore wind, at 4 o'clock tomorrow, there's going to be a session dedicated, and at 3 o'clock on Friday, we're going to have a session on supply chain and the sustainability aspects. So if you're interested in a deeper dive into those topics, please make sure you get along here. Our next speaker today is Mr. Nick Uguchi from, he's a partner and co-head of renewable energy at Baker McKenzie Tokyo. Welcome, Nick. Please make him welcome.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for your kind introduction. My name is Nick Eguchi, partner of Baker McKenzie Tokyo office. I'm honored to speak in Hamburg. Yesterday, Matthias started with Beatles. So I'd like to start with someone else. Do you know a famous actor in the movie of Mission Impossible? Do you know? Tom Cruise, yes. Do you know how old is he? No. He is 60 years old. Do you know how old Nick is? 60. So all you have to remember today is Nick is same age as Tom. And mission is possible. Okay, now let's start my presentation. My Baker McKenzie has an office in all over Asia, and my colleagues kindly prepared so Baker McKenzie Asian colleagues prepared one-page slide of each country. And the order of the slide is from developed country to the early stage countries. So you can see the development of those countries. My presentation is only 10 minutes and a speed tour in Asia. So if you have any questions later, please send me an email. My email address is the last page of this presentation. I'm sure you will get my slide at a later stage. So you don't need to take a picture of the slide. Of course, you can take a picture of me, so free. So let's start with the most advanced country. It's a China. It's a PRC, People Republic of China. As you can see from the top line, they are reached to 26.38 gigawatt. So clearly, they are the #1 market. But it's difficult for overseas investors to penetrate into a Chinese market. I did a research and only I found EDF projects. I couldn't find any other project of the international players penetrate into a Chinese market. So it's a big market, but we need to see how to penetrate into a PRC market. Next is Taiwan. As you have heard, Taiwan is a big market, and the Siemens Gamesa open up factories. It's a great news. So clearly, they are developing very quickly. At the moment, they only have 237 megawatt in operation, but already 5.5 gigawatts is awarded, and also at the moment, round 3 auction is going on. So it's a great market to invest. Now move on to Japan, which is my home country. And thanks to Matthias of BP, he advised Japanese company a lot. And we finally closed round one auction last Christmas Day. The Mitsubishi Corporation won the 3 sites, 1.7 gigawatt in total. So it's amazing. I advised another bidder, but our client unfortunately lost the bid because the Mitsubishi Corporation's price was the same level of the European price and Taiwan price, taking into account of the lower wind speed in Japan. So it's a very competitive market from the round one. And we'll have round 2 and round 3 combined from this December. So it's about 1.6 gigawatt size again. So please visit Japan. And Japan will open up the travel restriction next month. So you do not need any more PCR tests and any certification. So you can freely come to Japan from next month. And then Republic of Korea, as explained before, the Korea is also the big market. They are growing very rapidly. So it's a good competition between Japan, Korea, and Taiwan, and the competition and the cooperation. So you will see a big jump of the Korean market. And Vietnam, Vietnam is an up and coming market. At the moment, it's a zero in installation, but they have a big plan, 7 gigawatt by 2030 and 64.5 gigawatt by 2045. But the issue is a credit risk of the national off-taker, EVN. So we definitely need credit agency support, such as Asian Development Bank or European Export Credit Agency to support the off-taker's credit risk, or Vietnam central government credit support to the EVN credit risk. But if we have that kind of a system, then it's a big market in Vietnam. And Australia, as you know, Australia is a big country and they have lots of onshore wind, but now they are thinking about offshore wind as well. And they have a draft plan, and they will introduce 2 gigawatt by 28 and 8 gigawatt by 28 and onwards. So it will be a up and coming market. And we have a slide of the Thailand, Philippines, and Indonesia, and Malaysia, and Singapore. But those countries are early stage of the offshore wind project. So we need to watch, but it's a very early stage at the moment. I have some slides of the Japanese market, but I'll skip. So that's all my presentation. And if you have any questions, please send me an email to this address. Thank you very much. And mission is possible. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nick. It's great to glad it's mission impossible and not risky business. We are moving into the panel session now. And so I'd like to welcome to the stage. Oh, actually, before I introduce Amisha, who's going to run the panel session, I need to say that Nick's slides, for anyone that would like to see Nick's slides, you can download them from the Global Wind Energy Council website. So at gwic.net, you can find Nick's presentation from today. You can also see you can actually see Nick's presentation and him delivering it on our YouTube channel as well. But I'd like to invite to the stage now the Global Head of Policy and Public Affairs at Mainstream Renewables, Amisha Patel. Welcome, Amisha.
Thank you very much. Can everyone hear me? Oh, brilliant. That's a lot of thumbs up. Well, hello and welcome to you all, and thank you for for being here and making the morning rush. You clearly beat the crowds. Thank you, Stuart, for the warm welcome and for the GWEC to the GWEC team for this opportunity. Now, Nick, I think we all loved your analogy about Mission Impossible and the mission truly being possible. And the spotlight this morning is how we get things going in Asia. So without further ado, I'd like to invite our panelists. First of all, Christian Bender, Commercial Head of Offshore Platform and Portfolio Management at Siemens Gamesa Renewable Energy. Welcome back. Thank you, Christian. Next, we have Eloise Burnett, Senior Asia Manager at Carbon Trust. Welcome, Eloise. Danielle Yarsky, Chief Development Officer, Offshore Wind at RWE. Please join us. Marty Sintha Van Rog, Head of International Business at Gulf Energy Development. Welcome, Marty. And last but not least, Akim Berger Olsen, CEO at Skyborn Renewables. Please join us. Welcome, Akim. Well, good morning to you all. Thank you for being here. So first of all, we have tasked our panelists this morning to put together 3 to 4 minutes worth of remarks explaining to us why the spotlight is on Asia. I'd like you to tell us a bit about your organization, a bit about what you're doing in Asia, and some of the opportunities and challenges that you foresee, and perhaps signal to 1 or 2 markets where you see a lot of promise. So who am I going to go to first? Akim, Skyborn Renewables, recently born. So let's start with you.
Yeah, thank you. Hi, everybody. You can hear me? Yeah, good. Yeah, well, I'm representing Skyborn Renewables, which is not a new player. It's the new name of WPD Offshore, which was acquired by GIP in May, and the closing was just 2 weeks ago. And Skyborn Renewables is our new name. I got often the question, why did you choose? Well, the easy answer is because we deal with Skyborn Renewables. That's what we do. It's all coming out of the sky, and that's where the name comes from. Well, our portfolio in Asia, I think, is known. We have a big presence in Taiwan with 1 project under construction, another one awarded, and obviously we will participate in the upcoming tenders. And then we have a presence in Korea, Japan, Australia, India, and developments in Vietnam, Indonesia, and Malaysia. And I hope I haven't forgotten anything, but that's what we do. So we had a focus on the Asian region. Question why? We think, obviously, because of the growth perspective. We believe in offshore wind. We are true believers. We believe that every single country on this planet will discover that resource if they have the access. So if they have access to bigger coastlines and open water, they will finally employ the offshore wind resource. And it's just a question of time, and obviously also a question of the alternatives around other energy sources. But finally, they will do offshore wind. And then for us, it's just a question, okay, which country will do it before the others? And what are the circumstances? And then we just do a ranking, like I guess everybody else. We need to prioritize, we need to focus. I think we did a good job in choosing Taiwan as our first and main focus in the early years. The reason was that we developed onshore projects for about 15 years in Taiwan, and about half of the onshore capacity in in Taiwan was developed by us, and yeah, well, nowadays by WPD, but still this is the history. And then it was an easy jump for us into the offshore part. And if I name a second market, I would also say Korea probably as the next one coming up. But I think I had only 3 minutes, so that's it.
Thank you very much. Eloise, let's go to you next.
Yeah, thanks. So I'm Eloise Burnett. I'm Senior Asia Manager at the Carbon Trust. I'm coming from Asia from a slightly different perspective from the rest of my panelists. So Carbon Trust is a mission-driven organisation that is focused on supporting both public and private sector moving to net zero in any way, really. Our interest in offshore wind in Asia is twofold. We do a lot of advisory, working on creating and shaping regulation and policies, trying to support governments to understand the issue and create frameworks for the build out of offshore wind. We also work on collaboration platforms called joint industry programs, where we bring together industry, government, and other supply chain players to create and develop advisory, research, R&D, whatever we see are going to be projects that are going to accelerate the build out of offshore wind or reduce barriers that we see. Our most recent activity has actually been in the Philippines. So we have recently set up the Philippines Offshore Wind Joint Industry Program, which is an incredibly exciting initiative. We have 17 developers and supply chain players working with the Department of Energy and sitting in a room, coming together saying, you've done this elsewhere. What does the Philippines need to do? And for us, I think the Philippines is an exciting place to be, with a change of government, with a real drive from the central agencies that are in charge of offshore wind. So yeah, I'm really excited about the Philippines. But of course, I think the two things that I see is personnel. And we see the graphs, we see the numbers, and you've got to attract the talent that's going to build out the offshore wind to meet those stats, to allow that to happen. And it's got to happen at speed. I mean, I don't know if anyone else has read the ASEAN Energy Outlook released last week. It does not make very optimistic reading. The progress in the last 5 years has not been great. And so if we are projecting those same speeds out, then we will just not meet what we need to do. So I think it's about building that personnel and building capacity in the countries as early as possible. And hopefully we're doing our bit to try and do that.
Thank you very much, Eloise. Danielle, coming to you next.
Thanks, Amisha. And first of all, also to stay here interactive and in very fondness of Nick, who I much appreciate. I also thought about an analogy for today. And yesterday we had the Beatles. Today it apparently is a movie, so I will pick this up. And I guess we will come in our discussion later on to that as well. But when I prepared for the panel, in particular with a focus on the Asia Pacific, which has huge potential and is on the rise, I thought about Groundhog Day. And why did I do that? For two major reasons. And I guess all the panelists and I will chip in later, because it's for us as an industry and also for the governments out there in Asia, the question, will there be more weeks of winter, or will spring come and finally renewables, and in particular offshore wind, will kick in and become big and be the potential as it's theoretically possible. And the second dimension of this analogy of Groundhog Day, we are a mature industry. So we learned many lessons already. We shouldn't do the same mistakes in Asia again. We should be aware and clear about which kind of mechanism, which market design works well. I think this year's energy crisis also as a test quite some of the regulatory schemes. We've seen spikes in energy prices, etc. So we learned our lessons in market design, in supply chain, in the regulatory framework, in the efficient deployment of offshore wind as a business developer. So that's the second one. And I'm pretty sure we will tap on both dimensions as we go on. So keep that in mind and we get back to that. For my side, Daniel Jaske, as you said, I'm representing here the developers. So RWE is one of the largest offshore wind players in the world. We have a long-standing history of over 120 years, and we've been in the offshore business successfully for the last 20 years, so quite from the early start, and had some groundhog days, I must admit, so to say. Looking at Asia in particular, and we leave Australia aside, as I learned there will be a dedicated session later on. I think the potential is huge. If you look at the International Energy Agency's numbers, but also the Global WindEnergy Council numbers, theoretically, it's beyond the hundreds of gigawatts. And we really need to think what this means. We have a society of electrification. We have the climate crisis ongoing. So the foundation is there. And yeah, there are some auctions upcoming in Japan, the next round. So let's see what the results will be there. I think Korea, South Korea now needs to really find its way in defining, having a call from the top that renewables energy sources is part of their energy mix going forward, and then set the framework for the industry to develop and build those offshore wind farms. And of course, the many other markets you mentioned, I can only echo, and very happy to be here today. Thanks, Amisha.
Thank you very much. I'm sensing a lot of themes emerging here, so we'll come on to those. But Marty, can I hand the stage to you?
Okay, thank you very much. I'm Marty from Gulf Energy Development. We are a Thai energy developer. Total generation about 14 gigawatts in worldwide. So thank you for having me up here. I think that Asia is a very exciting market. We are very present. We have development in Vietnam, currently 120 megawatts that's being developed over there. And of course, as Nick mentioned, and my fellow panelists mentioned, the market is huge. You know, in Japan, in South Korea, we're exploring the Philippines and Indonesia. So it's good that we're on stage here to discuss this topic and this market. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Christian.
Yes, well, I gave some words at the beginning of the session. So I forgot to actually say what I'm responsible for. I'm responsible for all investments in offshore. And that's also why the factories in APAC are dear to my heart, because they are very high investments, I can tell you. So maybe picking up some of the things you said, which markets are we active in? I already mentioned Taiwan is probably the key market for us. We are also active in Japan as well. We are active in Korea, as you've seen from this memorandum of understanding. And we're a little bit special because you mentioned there's no European developers in China, but we do have a licensed partner in China. So we do business through Shanghai Electric in China as a manufacturer, which means we are also actually active in China through the licensed partner. When it comes to Groundhog Day, actually, that was actually very nice. I thought about Taiwan because I remember I was in headquarters approving projects back then. And then the Taiwanese team came and wanted approvals for the projects. It was 2016 or something. I said, it's never going to happen, guys. Yeah, never going to happen. Forget it. You've been coming the last 5 years. Yeah, this will never pick up. And actually, I was proven wrong. So that was very nice to see, I have to say. And that means, at least for Taiwan, that Groundhog Day has been overcome, I would say. And they're now on a very, very nice growth curve. So that's just something I wanted to mention from the past. You were part of that process, Achim. Yeah, so. When it comes to what's really important for us, I think the key is to have this region develop across countries, as I said. So if we do this investment and have a factory in one region, we really need to be able to leverage that across the other parts of the region, or maybe even globally, ideally. So that's what's important to us in the future development of APAC. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Christian. I can see quite a lot of nods in the audience, and we will be opening up the floor for questions shortly. But I do want to pick up on a few points with the panelists, and really sticking to the point that you've just raised about regional cooperation. And this is coming up quite a lot in the sector globally. We've seen so many talks across the North Sea, across Europe as well, and how we strengthen this and how this has an impact on strengthening cooperation amongst the supply chain as well. So I'd like the panel's views on regional cooperation in Asia. What are the early indicators? What are some of the challenges? And are there any lessons that can be applied from Europe or elsewhere to Asia? And Eloise, I'll come to you first, and then Akeem, and then we'll work through the panel.
Yeah, thanks, Misha. So we actually did a study, a year-long study on this exact question in 2021. We were tasked, we actually did this work with GWEC on, okay, we have models of cooperation and collaboration in the US, in the North Sea. They've been around for 10, 12 years. Can we replicate this? Can we look at maybe the 5, 6 leading geographies for offshore wind and see if there's a model that would work? I hate to say it, but the answer was no, not yet. And it's something that's what you've already brought up. It's the introspective, it's the looking after your own house first before turning around and looking outwards. And it is a huge missed opportunity. And it's something that I think we've got, as an industry, got to use our roles as kind of cross geography to make sure that we're bringing other geographies into those conversations, into those meetings, and saying, like, have you spoken to it? And I think those who were here yesterday and were around the World Bank delegations, they had a day where they just literally spoke to each other as emerging markets. And I spoke to the people from Azerbaijan and Romania and the Vietnamese and Philippines delegations, and they found it incredibly useful. So I think it's just chiseling away at that my area is my end of my country boundaries, and trying to encourage it. But yeah, we will continue to keep trying.
Akeem?
Yeah, I would agree. You know, they have to talk to each other for sure, and we maybe need to make them talk. So
Yeah.
GWEC and others have really an important function here. There are obviously historical connections, you know, which are important. I mean, for example, between Taiwan and Japan, there's a good connection regarding the industry, and this can be used, but we need to push them a bit. Otherwise, the industry will find their own ways. I think Korea and maybe also Vietnam and Singapore, they made good business now with the Taiwanese offshore wind supply chain and their problems in the end. But it's still a very nationalistic view, and this is not really positive for the entire industry. So we need to help them, and maybe we also need to look to ourselves about the shortage in the supply chain, which is partly made by us and the projects being very close to each other. So we now mentioned it in your presentation, the different vessels, and they're booked, obviously chartered by different parties. And if there's a small delay in one project, we have delay in 4 other projects, because we are all tied to each other. And we tend to sit on our asset and say, well, I've booked my period here and I will not give you anything, because I am really afraid if I give it to you, I'm not getting it back. So that's we see now in Taiwan, where we have the assets and blocking each other. This need to be overcome, and somebody has to moderate that. Somebody who's neutral, who's not tied into a project, that could help as well.
And just building on that, Daniel, you mentioned policy interventions. Can you elaborate and talk a bit about that and how that can be helpful?
Yeah, Amisha, it's really getting the basics right. So I think it first and foremost needs to have a clear framework and call from the government, a commitment of renewable energy sources in the energy mix, a clear path for offshore and other renewables energy sources. And then there needs to be, because that trickles down in the end. In the end, there's a local authority who needs to decide. There's local stakeholders, local community who needs to understand, who needs to be part of the project development, who also needs to and should benefit from also the economic development here. So this is the first. Then secondly, it's really getting the basics right. So having not only the call for renewables and offshore wind in the energy mix, but also an understanding what is the impact on grid infrastructures, transmission, having their holistic plan going forward. And also engaging with those authorities, with the TSOs, the ISOs, with the GENCOs, etc., and say, this is part of our strategic energy plan, and it needs to be also then coming there together. And then, of course, the market design as such is important, because we are talking here multi-billion investments in the supply chain, with the developers also benefiting local communities. So it needs to be clear when you make the investment decision what you're signing up for. And there are more market design frameworks which are more stable, and others which, in particular in the asset test of this year's energy crisis, have not been beneficial. And if it's the least beneficial, of course, if it hits through fully on the consumer prices, I think this is nothing we all want overall to see, and get the renewables employments stalled on that. So this is really key classical pillars which need to be in place to drive this forward.
Did you want to come in, Marty?
Yes, I'd like to reiterate that, with the current energy crisis right now, it's key that the stakeholders need to come together and just sit and talk, because it can't just be the developers talking to the government, or the government just talking to the communities. Everybody has to come together to speed things up, because time is of the essence, as we can see. We don't want to delay any development, and developers know what needs to get done and can help the government shape the policy, right? Because sometimes we understand that the government may not know every key element into developing onshore wind, offshore wind. We're here to help, and we'd love to work with everyone, and also with the local communities. Sometimes we want to get them involved, and we want to help them, or job creation as local supply chain, for example.
Just staying with the policy theme just for a little bit longer. We've seen, again, sort of advancements in Europe where we're looking at sort of auctions and looking at non-price criteria coming into auctions. You've all outlined and sort of signposted very different range of markets within Asia, from Thailand, Philippines to Vietnam to Taiwan, all on very different journeys, the same one, but in very different advancements in terms of their policy mechanisms. Can I just get a bit of an insight from our panelists as to which particular markets in the region do you think are heading in the right direction, bearing in mind we've got a broad audience listening, so this is a perfect opportunity to hit some messages home, if you like, and any sort of areas that you think need particular focus. Eloise, you're nodding. Can I come to you first?
Yeah, I have. I think the one that needs particular focus builds upon what you just said about the pricing that's coming through in Europe, and the want and desire and the optimistic ambition that markets can leapfrog straight through to those very low prices. And I think this is something we're seeing, a reluctance from governments to really commit to what we know is needed in early stage markets, which is the incentives. It's the expectation that prices are going to be high. I think in particular in India, our work in India, we're seeing a really sluggish appreciation that cost parity is not going to happen straight away. The zero price contracts aren't going to be the ones that come through their door straight away. And it's frustrating, because we know that that's going to damage the market eventually, because it will just have a bit of bad press at the beginning from all the stakeholders that are involved. So it's a frustration for us to see that assumption coming through. I don't know if anyone wants to comment on that.
Anyone else? Marty?
Well, as far as policy goes, I guess the only comment that I can share with our experiences, we don't want to burden any party with shaping policy. We would be glad to help comment, to help explore, to get data. We're the experts, we're developers, and we'd be happy to work with any government that we're exploring opportunities in that country.
Yeah, can only echo that as well. And there are lessons learned and also mirroring that with the potential in Asia. Just picking one example, in Japan, the average size of an offshore wind farm is still below 400 megawatt. In Europe, this is considered a very small size already, meaning the scalability and the efficiency on the industry isn't applied yet, which then effectively also will have an impact on the offtake and the prices. So this is one example of many where we tapped already into, where I think the lessons learned will prevent us from another Groundhog Day. And the willingness and the ability of the industry is there. We are ready.
Thank you. Akeem, sure.
Yeah, well, I think for new markets which are not developed yet, there's only one system which really has turned out to be very successful, and this is a fixed-in feed-in tariff. That's it. Why is all the industry in Taiwan? Not because of the nice price tenders now, but because we had these huge feed-in tariff in the beginning. That was the honey, and then everybody was attached to that one, and yeah, they tricked us into that in a way. And I think that's a smart idea to have a first round, really attractive, high prices, and then they have established their organization. And then from a politician point of view, you have to get the price down, and then we have to figure out what to do. I think that's a very smart idea. And if it's not a developed market, I'm a big fan of easy, simple conditions. So we do not need any tariff anymore. We can definitely work with steep PPAs. We are very well developed. We don't need that support. We need some order how to get the grid connection and how to do the localization of the sites. That's it. Otherwise, we don't need any more help.
Christian, did you want to come in?
Just to pick up on what you said, I think we need a certain project size. I fully agree to what all of you said. I think we need transparent and clear rules, as you mentioned, looking out countries for acknowledge that there is a supply chain outside of your own country that's quite competitive. That's for me the key, what I would recommend.
Now, Christian, now that you've mentioned project size, and you know that I've been burning to ask you this question, it's pretty impressive how offshore turbines have evolved in the last 30 years. Where do you think we'll be in 30 years from now?
Well, that's hard to say. Yeah, I think if we look back in time, maybe that gives us the indication. I think 30 years ago we had a project in Denmark called WindEnergy that was actually from our predecessor company, Bonus, and that was 450 kilowatt turbines with 13 meter blades, and now we have the 14 megawatt 236 rotor today, 30 years later, and I'm pretty sure nobody would have guessed that would come if you had asked anybody. And I have some quotes actually from not so long ago where people said that we will never be able to manufacture anything like that. So the technology is progressing. I'm not sure where it will head, but one thing is for sure, we will not. What we don't want to do is we don't want to lose track of what the infrastructure is doing out there. So that means when it comes to foundations, we have to be very careful. When it comes to installation vessels, when it comes to harbors, when it comes to manufacturing facilities, what we don't want to do is, let me put it this way, build the next, A380 or so. No, that doesn't make sense. So where it will end, I don't know, but I'm sure technology will progress.
Yeah, and it's mission possible, right?
It is mission possible, yes. Yeah.
Brilliant. Well, I'm going to pause here for a moment and just scan the audience. If you've got any questions for our panelists, can you raise your hand and try and catch my eye? Okay, the gentleman at the back, and we have a roaming mic. If you could just state your name and your affiliation, that would be greatly appreciated.
My name is Manuel Zaya. I'm from Formosan Business Support based in Taiwan. And I founded my company at the beginning to develop the local supply chain in Taiwan. But due to low demand on the local side, it's much more focused to do know-how transfer from Europe to Taiwan. And my question is a private company like Siemens Gamesa, or we have seen recently in the Union project, there are a lot of challenges. And as a private company, how you want to change the mindset of the Taiwan government? Like in the Siemens Gamesa assembly line in Taichung, there's only one road going to the port. And if you want to expand, you have to bring the workers from the city 50 minutes by car. And I don't see enough commitment from the Taiwan government to support the companies who are building the industry, to give the infrastructure and the loans necessary to build the supply chain. Thank you.
Yeah, so I had a little difficulty at the beginning to understand, but your question is basically, how do we as a private company interact with, let's say, the powerful governments in the country and try to get things to work so that we efficiently produce? Yeah. That is something that our colleagues on the ground are doing. I think also, for example, Achim would be doing this kind of work with his organization, where it's simply talking to each other and trying to explain what is, if there's basically a road problem, similar problems we would have had, for example, in our facility in Hull in the UK. That is normal. Then you sit down with a local council and you try to find a way how to work it out. So normally the local municipalities are very supportive in this kind of thing, because they know that it will attract jobs, and it's good for all involved. So that would be my answer to that one.
Akeem, did you want to come in and then Taiwan?
Yeah, I would agree. I think this is manageable in the end. You know, I'm not too concerned about this part of it, because there will be a solution if there is a need and so on. I think the problems are more in the overall regulations, which make it very difficult for us to align with the projects and build them in the most speedy and successful way.
Any other questions from our audience? Gentleman at the back there.
Hi, everyone. My name is Nat. I'm working in project control for ENBW. I have several questions. I think the panelists also already tackled the grid infrastructure. I think as we would see, the next generation wind farm would be a gigawatt scale. How could we, as an industry, make sure that the government are ready to build that infrastructure for us to build the wind farm, or as an industry as a whole to build the next, gigawatt wind farm?
Who wants to take the grid question first? Danielle.
I can give it a try. I think it's important to have a view on holistically on the network, on the grid and transmission design. Of course, locally where the point of interconnection is, but also then nationally. And this is clearly, besides the commitment and the goals for renewables, in a market, another task which needs to be taken up by the state or the regulatory authorities to say, okay, we need to think this through, how we build a holistic grid and transmission design. Effectively, you can also think about reuse of when you have phase out of conventional, of reuse of existing grid and transmission infrastructure. And this, of course, needs to come all together and is in the hands of the most experienced authority in that respect, mainly the transmission and grid authorities.
Thank you. I think we've got, oh, yeah, we've got another question. Thanks, Rico.
Hello, my name is Jacopo Landi. I'm a journalist for French media. Actually, I had more of a clarification just to be sure I understood correctly for the gentleman from Skyborn Renewables. At one point, you said you don't need feed-in tariffs anymore to develop your projects and that you can manage with PPAs and other types of contract. I wanted to be sure if I understood correctly, if it's just for the Taiwanese market And if maybe it's also the case for other developers like RWE? Thanks.
Well, for my part, if it's a well-developed market like Germany, for example, we do not need any tariff anymore. We have, for example, our own Gennaker project in coastal waters. There will not be any tender. It's just our own business, how to get the income into the project, and we do fine. You know, that's we will manage to do so. But if you want to have an entry into a market, a new market, then let's say Indonesia. If they really want to make a big industry, offshore wind industry in Indonesia, they should think about a high feed-in tariff for the first round.
Thank you. Does that clarify?
Just to add on this, I think the general headline is to have a prudent and reliable market design, because we as developers are committed to not only come in for one round, and I think you also didn't mean that, but to stay there for long, because we are committed to a market. And a reliable and prudent market design gives that investment and investors kind of confidence, because we are talking here in investment in supply chain, we are talking investment in projects, etc. So one of the largest offshore markets in the world, in particular now in this year of the energy crisis, the UK, with the CFDs, did quite a good job, because you also have the balance of not seeing necessarily the energy price spikes, and it's a win-win for the developer and the government to get to the agenda of renewables build out. So I think there are various models out there. You're fully right. The corporate PPA market is rapidly increasing, and I think we are very much welcoming this. And under the headline of the climate crisis, it's anyhow a must-have going forward, because we need to see the decarbonization of the industry.
Thank you. Marty, did you want to come in on that?
I also agree with that. You know, the government should come together with developers so we can share our experience, because looking just in historical values doesn't mean that it may apply to your specific country. Maybe it's a hybrid model that they need to come up with. Perhaps start with a PPA and then turn into something else later. But the point is, we are happily willing to share and work with local governments and local partners.
Thank you. I think we've got time for one more question. Got any more? All right. Well, in that case, I'm going to invite each of our panelists to leave us with one takeaway in an area that we didn't get to discuss in our panel session, because I think we could have carried on for ages. So there's so much to talk about. So Akeem, you've got my eye, so I'm going to come to you first.
Well, when we were discussing the grid connection, I think there is a huge potential for using the sea as the area where you put the cables in. Just as an example, in Sweden, it's also a long country with a long coastline, but there you have to increase the grid capacity from the north to the south. And one easy way would just be to put the cables into the sea. Can be done much quicker, much easier than to run through 1,000 kilometers with all the landowners. Of course, this infrastructure is more vulnerable, as we learn these days. But maybe we can have a better look on our stuff and protect that.
Question, I'll come to you. Oh.
Yes, well, I was thinking but that's fine. I think what I haven't said, I think what's important for us, coming back to the investment part of it, is to have clear rules, having schemes also in Asia Pacific that don't incentivize negative bids from the developers, because that basically goes back to the whole supply chain and puts so much pressure that we will not have the capability to invest if that continues. And I mean, we're in severe financial difficulties. You've seen this in other podium discussions, probably during the trade show. So I think that's something that's very important for us, to get to more qualitative evaluations away from this negative bidding, let's call it vicious cycle. Yeah.
Eloise?
Yes, I think I just going to hark back to one of my earlier points about personnel. I think every graph we see shows that it's going to be a it's a growth market, and in perhaps a poorly formed analogy, you know, it's a big cake that we've got at the end. Everyone's building this big cake, but we don't have enough acres at all. And I think really we just got to start building the capacity in these countries.
Marty?
Yes, I just want to share that it's important for governments to possibly support developers in looking at the projects, because for some countries, the development costs are a lot higher than others due to connection costs or transmission costs. So we look for local partners. We need to all work together and take a look and see how we can get it done. It's probably not impossible, but we need the support from all sides. Thank you.
And last but not least, Danielle.
Amisha, as I mentioned Groundhog Day, I will at least get back to it and really to say, in each of the countries we mentioned namely, but overall in Asia, the potential is huge. And we are in the midst of an energy and climate crisis. In this conference, we tend to forget because we are all thinking alike. We are all want to drive wind forward. We all want to drive renewables forward. And Asia has the potential, and each one of the markets now needs to take the lessons learned, be clear on the commitments, have the clear goals, have the strategic transmission and network plans, be clear on port infrastructure, and get the basics right, and have a prudent and reliable market design. And then we are all up for that.
With that, thank you very much to our panelists. Can I invite you to join me in thanking our panelists in the usual way? Thank you very much. And thank you to you all for joining us. Just a couple of other things. I'm not sure, I think I've seen some of you read the GWEC Global Offshore Wind Report. If you haven't got a copy yet, please visit the GWEC stand, and it's also available to download on their website as well. It's a must read, so please do download that and have a look. And I hope you all enjoy the rest of the conference.